Hi, good evening. My name is Andrew. I'm the prepared foods manager at the Elmwood store. Tonight, I'm going to show you how to break down a turkey and roast it and present it in just about 2 hours.
2 hours? How could you do it so fast?
Well, what we do is when we break it down, we take it off all the bones. When we're cooking it, it cooks a lot faster because there's a lot less mass. You don't have the bones absorbing the heat as everything goes through, as it goes through the oven and the cooking process.
Gotcha. How many turkeys have you roasted this month?
By the end of the month, between both stores, we're going to be at about 100 turkeys total for both kitchens.
That's a lot of turkey.
That is a lot of turkey.
All right, so you're going to show us how to break down a turkey?
Yep.
Let's get started.
I always like the word love just to be safe and clean. It makes life a lot easier when you have to touch something else in the kitchen.
And everyone on Instagram Live, if you have any questions while Andy's showing you how to break down a turkey, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of this presentation.
Okay, so on the cutting board here, we have a 25-pound Wendell's turkey. It's a very large bird. It's one of the larger ones we get. First step, we're going to reach in the cavity here and pull out all the offal and the giblets. It's the neck and the hearts and the lungs. There's a lot of different uses for these. Every family, every tradition has something to do with them. In the case of the kitchens at the co-op, we use it in our stocks. So I'm going to start with the bird. We have our 2 wings, our 2 legs, and the 2 breasts are on top. And then on the underside are the 2 thighs. What we're going to do is we're going to basically cut this off the entire carcass, leaving everything else whole, and have 8 pieces in the end. So I'm going to start. I'm going to take a knife, go right down the middle. This is the chest bone. I'm going to start right on one edge of it. Taking my knife to keep it as close to that chest bone as possible. I like to start away from me. It's just a little bit easier to see. And there's a little bit more to hold on to. As you are going down, you'll be able to feel. Just keep your knife as close to the bone as possible. A lot of smaller little cuts work a lot better for this. And then for visual purposes, I'm going to open this up so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to take my knife and cut right in between the leg and the breast. There's just a large flap of skin here. This will open everything up. You can kind of see the separation between the breast here and then the leg and the thigh down here. I'm going to continue cutting down these lines, making sure not to cut into either the leg and the thigh or the breast. And then this will open up a little bit further, and I can continue cutting down the bones. There will be a little pin bone right here. I'm going to cut down. When I get it off of it, I'll show you what it looks like. It's just a very thin little bone. That's what the tenderloin sits on. And I'm going to continue the process all the way down, keeping as close to the bones as possible. Back here is just extra skin. This is basically from the neck. So I'm going to cut this off, and I'm going to actually trim this right off and keep this with our stockpile. Trim right down. Eventually, we're going to hit a joint. That is where the wing comes in. You can see my knife just went right through it right there. And this is all going to come off as one large piece. So this piece right here is the breast, and then we have the wing. For this, I'm going to cut this right at this joint. It might take a little bit to open that up to find where the actual joint is. If you do have issues getting into that joint, simply stretch the wing out, grab the smaller part of the wing, and break it back. And then it'll open up that. and you can take your knife right through it. And I'm going to set that in my roasting pan. And the next step is I'm going to take this actual wing right off the breast. For carving purposes, I like to keep the breast completely boneless. Right here in this, there's not a single bone in here. And I'm going to set that in my roasting pan. The next step is going to go back to my whole bird and do the same thing on the other side. It's the exact same thing, just mirrored.
We have more people join. Andy, could
Okay.
you keep talking us through
Sure.
on the other side?
Absolutely. So what I did on the first side was I cut the breast off. All I did was take the chest bone, found the chest bone, and I went on either side of it and slow with small, short cuts, followed as closely to that bone as possible, all the way down. And then I'm going to, once I get in here to where it starts to get a little tight to see, I'm going to come to the outside and cut right in between here. Right in between the breast and the leg. You can care sure not to hit either one of them. As I make those cuts, this will open up a little bit. And I can then see the bottom of the breast. They will see a whole cavity in between both of these. It kind of makes life a little bit easier when you're carving it down.
And what kind of knife should you use?
You can use pretty much any knife you're most comfortable with. The sharper the knife, the better. In this case, I'm just using a smaller knife. I recommend for everybody a boning knife, which is just a little bit longer than this, probably about 2 inches longer. That's usually the best. That's what I recommend. But you can use, you can use pretty much anything you have at home. Just make it your sharpest knife possible. So once I got down to the end of the carcass, here, there's going to be a joint. I'm going to find where I can get my knife through it. Yet again, if you can't get through this joint, put one hand on the top, one hand here, and press back. It'll open up the joint, and you can get right through there. And same thing, just follow this straight down. And then I'm going to flip it over. Yet again, like the other side, I'm going to trim off some of the extra fat and skin. It's just not necessary. As you can see, that's a lot of extra fat that it's just kind of there. So we're going to throw that with our stock pot. And then, yet again, the breast with the attached wings. I'm going to cut right in between here and aim for the joint. I happen to hit it right where I can get through it, so I didn't have to break it this time. If you're having issues with it, you can grab both of these and bend it backwards, and it will open that up for yourself. Set that in my roasting pan, and then I'm going to go through here and just pull this little wing off, just to keep my breast, again, fully boneless. So the underside, you have a fully and completely boneless breast. Set that in my roasting pan. If anybody's curious where the wishbone is on a turkey, you can actually feel it right in here. I'll cut it out real quick. There's going to be a little separation. You're going to feel a small bone that goes right along this edge, and then there's some meat behind it, and then there's the rest of the carcass. So you're going to have this. You're going to follow your knife right behind it. And once it's cleaned up, you'll have your wishbone. Just a little break on me. And then there's your wishbone. Okay, so then the next step Now that the breasts are out of the way, I'm gonna go for the legs and the thighs. So I'm gonna feel right along this line here. You're gonna feel a bone come up right about to here. I'm gonna take my knife and go right along that bone. And as I go down, same thing with the breast. Short little cuts, just to make sure you're not getting too far in. I'll cut this right down, and you'll be able to expose more of the thigh. What I did there was open up the joint here, so I can further take this off. I'll continue this line across. And then I have a leg and thigh. I'm going to take the other one off just to save some room on the cutting board. So there's the bones right in here. They kind of come up like a U shape. I'm going to take my knife and follow that right up. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to start feeling the joint. It's always going to come in right about here. I'm going to do the same thing like on the other side. Crack that back so I can see exactly where the joint is. I'm going to take my knife, follow these lines straight down. I'm just going to try this off. And then I have my other thigh. There will still be, on the bones, there is still a good amount of meat on there. This is perfect for making turkey stock. If you have extra time, and say this doesn't fit in your pot, it does break. There is backbones right in here. You can get right in between one of them and break it into 2 smaller pieces. Turkey stock is as simple as the bones and any extra meat you have with a little bit of carrot, celery, onion, and any other flavorings you want in there. It's pretty open to interpretation when it comes to flavors. And you can cover it with water, bring it to a simmer, and let it simmer for a couple hours. The longer they simmer it, the better it is. Okay.
Do you have to skim it?
You will get a little bit. You can skim it. Probably recommend it. It just makes it look better. It'll make it look clearer in the end. If you bring it to a boil and let it boil for too long, it's going to be cloudy. If you bring it to a boil and catch it just as it hits a boil and brings it to a simmer, it won't be as cloudy. You'll have a lot clearer of a stock. So the next step I'm going to have here is I'm going to cut this. I'm going to cut the leg off of the thigh. Same thing like the wings. I'm going to go right in the middle of the joint. If you're lucky, you're going to hit the joint right away. If not, you're going to crack it. Here I can kind of see it, so I'm just going to take my knife right through it. Okay, and then I have one leg and one thigh. Those do have bones in them. The reason I like to leave the bones in there is, yes, we have less roasting time because of the mass of those bones, but these are a lot smaller pieces of meat compared to the breasts. So we need to even out that cooking time a little bit. And you do that by leaving some mass in these, extra mass.
And the even cooking is what keeps all the meat juicy.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, very much so. Keeps everything juicy. Okay. And then everything's separated. Obviously, my roasting pan here is a little bit crowded. So if you have a second pan, you can do that. You don't actually have to use a roasting pan in this method. You can roast them just on cookie sheets with a little bit of parchment underneath. One downfall to that is you don't get any kind of you won't get as many drippings that you can add into your stock in the end. If you do it in a roasting pan, we'll season this with a little bit of salt and pepper and put about 1 inch of water in the bottom of the pan and cover it. And we'll bake that at 1.5 hours. After an hour and a half, I'll check the temperature of it. When checking the temperature of a turkey, there should be two, you should always check 2 spots on the turkey. One, I'm going to actually show you where it is. I have my thermometer here. So one, you're always going to check right inside the thigh. You're going to want to get as close to the bone as possible, but not touching it. If you're touching the bone, it's going to give you a bad reading. So in this case, my turkey's pretty cold. And then the other place you're always going to check is the breast. So you're going to try to find the fattest, thickest part of the breast and go right in there and take the temperature. Once it gets up to about 135 for both places, that's when you're going to want to remove the foil. And you're going to let it just cook uncovered for about another half hour and then check the temperature again. Once your thighs get up to 175 degrees, you're all set to go. Those are done. Once your breasts get up to 165, you're all set to pull it. You do this, the thighs always do take a little bit longer to cook. They're darker meat. They'll have a little bit more blood in them. Plus, we left the bones in them. So you just want to make sure that they're actually there and done. Okay.
And you should have 8 pieces, you said?
8 pieces. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4. And this is going to be actually 10, but normally you could leave these 2 as well. And there's your 8 pieces.
All right, great. So after your juicy turkey comes out of the oven,
I'm going to switch gloves.
we're going to carve it up.
I'm going to show you how to carve this. So we have our roasted pieces. I don't have the wings here. Some people save them, some don't. It's personal preference. When it comes to carving the legs, there's not a whole lot you can do. These are always kind of presented whole. As growing up, this is one of my favorite things. I always have the turkey leg. And then we're going to go on to the thighs. There is going to be 1 bone in the middle of the thighs. It's going to be 1 straight bone. So I'm going to cut right down to it and kind of around it in a circle. Now, there's nothing that says you can't leave this whole and allow your guests to do this on their own if they'd like. This just makes it a little bit easier to eat. You get a little bit better mix on the platter if you do it like this. So as you can see, I cut basically straight down on both sides of the bone. And then I did 1 cut on the inside. And then all I'm going to do is take this, try to lay it out as flat as possible, and I'm just going to slice it. Yet again, with that 1 bone missing, there's no more bones in there. You can slice your pieces as evenly or as thick and thin as possible. It is a little tough to slice thighs because there's all kinds of different lobes. As you can see, all those different pieces, that's a different muscle in the thigh. Some people don't really cut these up or slice them. You can simply just pull the meat off the bone if you'd like. It's personal preference. So I'm going to only cut 1 of those. I'm going to try to present it like that and stick those up like this. And then I'm going to go to my breasts. So you can, yet again, leave these on for show. I always like taking them off. It just makes presenting and carving a lot easier for myself. So that's all I'm going to do. Is just carve around it. And yet again, you can present that with that. And from here, all I'm going to do is take my breast meat and slice it. I like nice long slices, so I'm always going to cut on a bias this way. You could cut this way. It doesn't hold together as well. And you could cut just straight this way, and you're just going to get smaller pieces.
pieces for turkey sandwich.
These are the perfect turkey sandwich pieces. It makes it a little bit easier when you're doing this, as if your turkey's not fresh out of the oven. Let it sit for a couple minutes. Let it sit for 15, 20 minutes before you do it. Your hands will appreciate it. And then if I were to say, be presenting this on a platter, I would kind of set all this up at like one end. Set this up at one end. I'll take one breast and lean it up and fan it out a little bit. So you get a nice presentation, and then you have all your dark meat underneath.
Fantastic.
And that's how you roast and carve a turkey in just about 2 hours.
Awesome.
The next step, let's look at gravy.
Let's do it.
We'll head into the kitchen. We'll go from there.
All right. Folks on Zoom, we're going to just stop the video.
All right.
Okay, so on the stove here, I'm going to start making a roux. In the larger stock pot here, I have a little bit of turkey stock that we made previously. This is what you would drain. After you roast your turkey in the hotel pans, if you have any of that extra juice that's been the bottom, absolutely pour it in here. That's pure flavor. That's only going to make a better gravy. So for a roux, you can do this with any, I like to use butter. It's a very traditional way to do it. You can use any kind of oil. If you wanted to make a vegan gravy, obviously you wouldn't use turkey stock. You might use a vegetable stock or no chicken base. You can use earth balance. It's any kind of fat and flour. It's an equal amount. I'm going to do about a pound. I have about 2.5 gallons of gravy here. Or stock, sorry. I'm going to melt this down.
While that's melting, if anyone has any questions about gravy or about breaking down a turkey or carving it, let us know in the chat.
We got one here actually from the Zoom crew. How long can you freeze a turkey if you don't want to cook it all at the same time? So can you break it down and freeze it in pieces?
Absolutely. When you freeze it, you're gonna want to get as much oxygen out as possible. That's gonna keep it the freshest the longest. I recommend using one of the home vacuum sealers as your best bet. But you could also wrap it very tightly in plastic wrap and then a Ziploc bag and freeze it. If you freeze it in a Ziploc bag, I'd probably only give it 3 or 4 months just to be safe. If you use one of the vacuum seal techniques, you usually get about a year out of it.
All right. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to use that chat feature. Make sure I didn't miss any. Oh, the baking time and temperature for a turkey, Andy.
Okay, we roast all of our turkeys at 350. Baking time is going to obviously depend on the size of the turkey. For the 25-pound turkey that I just broke down, it's probably going to be about 2 hours and 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. It also depends. There's a lot of variables when it comes to time. How many times you open the oven, how many times you look at it, things like that. It'll be fine, just leave the oven closed. If it's a smaller bird, where it's maybe 10 or 12 pounds, you're going to want to start checking the temperature at about 45 minutes, maybe even sooner than that. The size of the bird drastically changes the amount of cooking time.
And when we're making the stock, are we adding cooked bones or uncooked bones to start the stock?
You can use uncooked bones. Uncooked bones are the best. I mean, you're going to have them. If you follow what I did, you're going to have them already. Some people, it depends on personal preference also. You could say that those bones that I have out there and actually roast those alone. until they have a little bit of roasted flavor. And it's going to just add a little bit more depth of flavor to it. Some people might take, if they had maybe a smoked turkey or something, or something along those lines, they could add those bones in and you have a little bit of smoky flavor. It's kind of open. You can use cooked. You're going to get more flavor out of the raw bones, but you will still get a good amount of flavor from cooked bones. So my butter is almost ready here.
How much butter and flour did we use in here? How much would you do for like a regular group of people? 8 people, or the government required under 10 people for Thanksgiving?
Roux is always good to have at home because you never know when you got to thicken something, especially if you like to cook at home. So this is very shelf stable. It's literally just butter and flour. You can always keep it in your refrigerator and use it anytime you need it. So if you have more, it's not a bad thing. Cooking at home, I'd probably start with 1 stick of butter, which is a 1/4 pound, and I would start with about a 1/4 pound of flour. It's always equal amounts by weight.
Okay.
So if you use a pound of butter, it's always going to be a pound of flour. Or if it's 1/4 pound, it's 1/4 pound. And you can scale and move it any way you need to.
That's more than a turkey tip. That's like a life tip.
Yeah. Make it real. It makes a lot of things.
And then I'm going to just add my flour and whisk as I go. As you can see, it's going to start thickening up. You're going to want to keep whisking as you add, just to keep as many lumps out as possible. Eventually, once you get close to the ratio of a pound to a pound, it'll be very thick. It's almost going to be like a paste. I'm going to take this a little bit further yet. Whisk it in, and we're almost there. Just a little bit more flour, and we'll be right about what we're looking for. So when we're making our roux, this is about the consistency you're going to want. It's going to kind of stay together. It's not going to be too loose, but it's going to stay together. It'll move freely. And then what you're going to want to do is just let this cook down for a couple minutes on its own. If you were to take this just as this state right now and put it into your gravy, and your gravy will thicken as soon as it comes to a boil, you're going to taste flour. Nobody wants that. That's not a good gravy. So there's a couple methods to get rid of that flour taste. One is to cook it down here, and then also cook it down in here too. So we're going to do a little bit of both. And then, as you can see, I'm just going to keep stirring this. If you don't stir it, it's going to burn, first off. And second, the longer you let this sit on there, the darker it's going to get. When you're making like Creole dishes and things like that, jambalayas, they call for a dark roux. That's essentially this. That's just been cooking for hours on very low heat. It's the same thing. So I let this cook a little bit. If you say don't have turkey stock, you could do all this in one spot. If you were going to just use the drippings from the pan, you could just do this all in one pot. Make your roux in your pot and add your drippings and let it cook down. So I'm going to turn my heat up on my stock. I just had it warming up. And now I'm going to take a whisk. It should kind of hold in the whisk like that. Then I'm just going to whisk it in.
You said this is for 2.5 gallons?
This is for 2.5 gallons.
That's about how much I need.
This is just our standard recipe. So you can scale it down from there. You know, like I said, This is shelf stable. You don't have to use all of it. You can save it for the next time it can be used in basically anything.
We do have a recipe for gravy for about 8 people on our website. So you can go to lexington.coop and all of the instructions on how to break down a turkey and roast it, and then as well as that great gravy recipe is there.
Okay, I'm just gonna, as that worked in, I'm gonna just go into my next mouth, my next whisk bowl, and keep whisking. It's very important as you're adding this to make sure you keep whisking to avoid lumps. Roux will clump up if you don't whisk it right away.
While you're whisking, can we talk about roasting bags and whether or not you should butter the turkey?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, when to roasting bag or not to roasting bag? I guess the question.
I have never used one. Honestly.
Okay.
I have always just roasted them as a turkey. There's nothing wrong with roasting them in a bag. It does kind of keep some of the moisture in. Because I've never done it, I don't know fully how the skin comes out on there. That would be my only concern, is because you're trapping all that extra moisture in there. Moisture is detrimental to crispy skin. The crispier your skin, the drier you want it to be.
And then what about butter? And I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for another person. How
Sure.
much butter? Where do we put the butter?
There's a lot of people that like to place butter underneath the skin. I would highly recommend that if you're going to leave your bird whole, because when you leave your turkey whole, you're going to have the breast exposed to most of the heat pretty much the whole time, and you run the risk of it overcooking before your thighs cook. So that just keeps extra fat, and the extra butter keeps extra moisture inside the breast. Some people like to put butter pads underneath the skin, and that helps the skin crisp up also. So I have all my roux added to the pot, whisking away. As this comes up, you're going to see it. I can tell it's already starting to thicken. I can feel it, but it's already thickened, and then we're going to just season it from here. Seasoning is your own personal preference. We like to just use salt, pepper, and then we do a little bit of poultry seasoning for a little bit extra flavor. I'm going to start with just a couple tablespoons of salt for this amount. And a tablespoon of pepper. You can use white pepper or black pepper. Some people like to use white pepper because it blends in. The only problem with using white pepper is sometimes it can be overpowering. I'm just going to whisk that in. And the closer this gets to a boil, it's going to thicken up a little bit more. And our gravy will basically be there.
Right.
The longer you let it sit, the better it's going to get. Once this comes up to a boil and it's at the consistency you would like, just turn it down to a very low and just kind of let it sit and stuff. So you're ready to go.
All right, looks like we have another question. All right, so we use flour. We usually, but someone usually uses cornstarch. What's the difference, and why don't we use cornstarch here?
Okay, so cornstarch works just as well. It is also a thickening agent. You mix it with water before adding it in. It's called slurry. Sometimes with the slurries, it's very easy to make it very gelatinous. And it doesn't have quite the amount of flavor as a roux does. The roux has butter in it. The fat is the flavor. We use a lot of cornstarch thickeners in our pie fillings and things like that, where you don't want too much other flavor. You want to taste the actual pie filling. But this is a butter. I mean, you put butter on your turkey. You're going to put butter on pretty much everything on the table. The extra flavor is not going to hurt. That's why we like to use roux for this. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes slurries, the cornstarch, they do get a little gelatinous If you had too much roux, this will be the same way. You can always thin it out with a little bit of water if you need to.
All right. And if anyone has last questions, you can message us on Facebook or Instagram. You can email us at 2cents@lexington.coop or call the stores. Both of our stores are full of turkey experts. And tomorrow is the big day at the co-op. The turkeys arrive. So our fresh, all-natural turkeys from Plainville and Mary's Heritage will arrive tomorrow. The Wendell's turkeys arrive on Monday afternoon. So get excited. It's the biggest time of the year for the co-op, and we're excited to help you make your Thanksgiving delicious, easy, and local this year. So thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Andy.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Happy
Andy.
Thanksgiving.